This is how to write compelling characters that have like depth to them. You obviously need a strong main character, and that's a different video. I'll talk about like strong main characters at a separate time, but I was just thinking about how to build relationships around that main character. So like, I guess the way that I do it is like for friendships, you have to establish history, and you should, show, don't tell. So like, have them joke around, have them make little references to things in their shared past. This is great anytime like you're, you know how you have like conversations with yourself in the shower, and you said, like, if this person said this to me, I would say that to them. Just tap into that part of your brain and imagine two friends. Imagine these two characters. You do have to kind of play pretend and imagine what these characters would say to each other. But, anytime that you get an opportunity in the story, you should be reinforcing and building, have them share their thoughts with each other. And, it doesn't have to be like, I want to sit down and share our thoughts. But, it shouldn't be. It should be like they have a genuine argument about something, But where was I? So establishing friendship, making it feel like a real relationship between two characters. Show, don't tell in terms of how they feel about each other. So like, the best way in a comedy and most things, in a romance and in a horror and an action, have them have an argument where one person is like, I do things by the book because that saved my life before. And somebody else is like, well, I've risked my neck improvising and that's what's turned out good for me. And there you go. Have them work that out and then, and then write them still on the same team after that. And if you do that, that's how you build like a relationship that feels real, like where, same as in real life where you have good days and bad days. But as time builds up with a person, the familiarity grows. You should show that in your writing when you're writing characters. Now let's talk about like main characters and villains instead. So in the case of villains, you need dynamic tension. And what that means is that the main character has to want something, has to need something that is opposed it doesn't have to be like permanently opposed, but it has to be clearly and obviously opposed to something that the villain wants and needs. And, I don't even consider it proper writing when a villain just is bad for no reason, of course. You only see that in like cartoons where a villain is just antisocial for no reason. You have to investigate that. You have to think of why this character is opposing our main character so firmly. And, I'm assuming some general storytelling things like that we like our main character. If it's an anti-hero, then maybe the villain is like a really good person. I wrote a short story where our main character is really unwell such that he is an anti-hero. We see from his perspective, but the villain in his story is a very responsible, helpful psychiatric doctor. But there's an opposition of goals. That's what sets that. And, the opposition should be dynamic such that like both sides are running out of time. They are, they can't just avoid this. And then the same way that I said before, where you talk to yourself in the shower and you think of like, if somebody said this, I would say this. You can model it on yourself. Think of if you had an argument with your boss or somebody, or you imagined having it. You can use that and have that be, as long as you can find the parallel in your own experience to the fictional thing that you're setting up. So in this example, if you're arguing with your boss, and just to keep it simple, I'll use this story that I wrote before, but just for the purposes of illumination. If I wanted to write an argument inspired from an argument I had with my boss, I would think about like power differential and like expectations. And I would write around that and think of an excuse to, again, just have to use your imagination. Think of a reason that they start talking, the first thing that the first character blurts out, and go from there and just kind of think, what would this character say? What would this character say? And the same thing with building friendships where callbacks are strong, and that's how you make the audience feel invested because like, if when you watch like a cartoon and it resets at the end of every episode, there's no stakes, nothing ever changes or evolves. Then when like two characters have an argument, the audience doesn't really care. But if you want to do deep, good characters, you should do the opposite. You should have the friends remember every time that they, keep track, every time that they betrayed each other, every time that they were true to each other. And likewise with the villains, every time that one of them failed or, rose to expectations, that should be top of mind for them. And don't tell it, obviously. Don't, that's the other thing I don't like about writing villains. When people do the bad guy monologue that we're all so familiar with, the reason that doesn't feel authentic is because that is exposition dump. It's let me quickly get this all out for the audience, but you really want to try to avoid that. It should be, so as an example, let me try to think. I have lots of characters. So in my novel, The American Demon Waltz, one of Bobby, our main character is Bobby, and one of her main antagonists is this shape-shifting monster named, who goes by Fira, mostly, and then, well, later, that's too complicated. You'll have to read the book. But so we'll call him Bobby and Fira. And in that case, the opposition between them is very visceral and obvious. Bobby is human, and she's defending humanity's interests, and likewise, Fira is defending the interests of something which is opposed to the well-being and self-determination of people. So again, I'm just trying not to give too much away, but the point is that these two goals are insoluble, and so that forces a climax that motivates both characters to move against each other, and it gives a reason why. And the only other thing that I would just recommend for good character writing is you do really have to be a little bit of an actor, play a little bit of pretend. You do have to imagine in your mind their whole mood. Do they speak a lot of slang? Are they very polite? How quickly do they get angry? Are they sarcastic? Are they untalkative? Like all these things, you should try to keep track of that, so that, because if your audience, especially in creative writing, is trying to imagine this in their head, they're going to be doing voices. They're going to be doing a little puppet show in their head with your characters. So, and they'll lose interest. They'll stop trying so hard to imagine the details if you don't give them like a sense of flavor for each character. So you do really need to kind of keep track of that. Like, is this character gruff? Are they shy? Do they stand up for themselves? Maybe only some. Here's another good example. So in the Three Edge game, I have a character named Junko, and she is a very timid, kind of passive, quiet person, at least at first. She seems to be. But she really lashes out at an authority figure who we find out through backstory has really done her wrong. So it turns out that she saves all of her fighting strength specifically for opposing that specific authority source. And so just things like that, you have to keep that in mind. You have to think of it yourself and do that world building for your characters' personalities first, but it pays off. And then that's the thing, once you get going, once you really like, okay, now I know I can picture this character's face and I can picture what they're like, I made my little imaginary friend for this writing assignment. Then the writing becomes very, very easy, because you would just think in your head, like an imaginary friend. You say, what would Junko say? What would Bobby say? What would Fira say? Well, everyone, if you liked this video, please make sure to like, subscribe, and leave me a comment. Talk to me about writing. Ask me a question about like your current work in progress, your WIP. Let me know how that's going. Thank you guys for your support on this one, especially. This one got a little bit more views. So my channel, the way it seems to go is lots of views for Dwarf Fortress and a little bit of views about creative writing. But I would love to do a lot of creative writing videos for you guys if you're interested. So yeah, just let me know with the response. I really appreciate it. And I'll catch everybody in the next one. I'd also like to really thank my patrons on Patreon. Patreon makes creative work feasible and possible for a lot of artists. My own link is right in the description of this video. My creative levels would really be not where they are without my patrons. So thank you guys so much. Thanks to each of you for everything.